Hey everybody, what's going on? Today we're going to be talking about Steven Spielberg's movie The Post starring Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. Based on a true story, a cover-up that spanned 4 U.S. presidents pushed the country's first female newspaper publisher and a hard-nosed driving editor to join an unprecedented battle between the press and the government. As with a lot of Spielberg movies, the greatest strength of The Post is its cast. First, I want to start with Tom Hanks, and you probably wonder why I'm not starting with Meryl Streep. I'll get to her in a bit. Hanks, as in most of the Spielberg movies he's been in, gives a pretty solid performance. He played the hard-hitting, somewhat devious news boss in the reliable Tom Hanks way. A lot of other familiar faces show up as well in both bigger and smaller roles. Sarah Paulson, Bradley Whitford, Bruce Greenwood, Alison Brie, and David Cross are all just a few of the actors who do a great job at keeping you invested in this story. My favorite performance had to be from Bob Odenkirk, who played an investigative reporter. Odenkirk was able to bring a little bit of that Saul Goodman charm and humor to a somewhat serious role. For me, he was always the best part of any scene he was involved in, but I might be a little biased. Now, on to Meryl Streep. Look, I might be committing Hollywood sacrilege here, but honestly, I wasn't too wowed with her take on Kay Graham. Now, I'm not saying the performance was terrible or anything. I'm just not going to call it the greatest thing ever just because it's Meryl Streep, which seems to be the critical Hollywood norm for what seems to be every one of her roles in pretty much every movie she's in ever. I thought there were scenes that she was in that really worked well and some that didn't. While I thought she worked well with the other cast members, I didn't think the performance really stood out in a way that a lot of people thought it did. And before you say, how dare I tear down such a strong female character, all I'm trying to say is that the strong independent woman aspect of her character felt forced by both her performance and the movie itself. Again, I like this movie, but I have to say this. Have you ever had one of those movies that you liked, but something just didn't feel right? While I enjoyed this movie, the whole time something didn't feel right about it. One thing is the character motivations. At first, it felt like the people working for the Washington Post wanted to break the Vietnam story just to beat out the New York Times. This happens for a while and honestly reminds me of real life. I work in news, and of course you want to beat the other guys to the breaking story. What really made me question the tone of the plot was that all of a sudden it was about getting the truth out there and standing up for the soldiers. I think the filmmakers needed to blend the characters' motivations better as a whole. Oh, and that whole breaking the story before the New York Times thing? Well, the New York Times didn't take too kindly to Spielberg in this movie, giving pretty much all the credit to the Washington Post. I've put a link to that story and the link to History vs. Hollywood in the description below. Though I did enjoy this one, find out how much was actually changed from the real story. Look, despite the glaring changes to the real story, I would still recommend this one. While not as engaging as, say, something like Spotlight, this is still a really good investigative journalism story. The performances are good to great, and while the suspense aspect is just okay, the story as a whole is still worth checking out. Just take that whole based on a true story thing with a big grain of salt. As always, thank you so much for watching. What did you think of The Post? Feel free to comment on it down in the section below. Till next time, I'm Gino Reynolds from The Real Gino.